When the Paladins of Light slew Dracula. Yeah, we already went over this portion. What's going on, folks, and welcome back to some V-Rising. Today we're going to be covering the last two developer blogs we need to break down to fully catch up on the game before early access. We've already covered the story portion of this first developer blog, which is titled Secrets of V-Blood, so we're going to go ahead and skip down to the Vestige of Power section. This post begins by describing the V-Blood life forms as the cornerstone of the V-Rising experience, truly terrifying specimens of both monsters and men that stalk the lands of Vardoran. V-Blood lifeforms will be one of the primary forms of progression in V-Rising. Defeating these creatures and humanoids, like a powerful necromancer for example, will allow you to snatch their magical talents and use these newfound abilities for your own. These encounters can happen all over the lands of Vardoran. An expert artisan might be found in their forge working on their next creation, or a military leader might be located in the heart of their stronghold. Players can track these lifeforms using a new feature Stunlock Studios introduced to the game called the Blood Altar. This workstation lets us set goals for ourselves, giving the player a measure of guidance and letting us pick which type of life form we want to pursue to advance the type of progression we're most interested in. Hunting for blood is essential for a vampire, so they wanted tracking down and hunting V-Blood lifeforms to be a central part of the core gameplay loop. They followed this up with the quote from the Stunlock Studios creative director. The Blood Altar guides the player to their prey, but doesn't dictate how or when they should pursue them. We feel that this strikes a beautiful balance between guidance and player autonomy in a way that feels natural to the vampire experience. Now, from the details we went over in the V-Rising story video, we know that there's a fundamental difference between those that possess V-Blood and those that do not. But how is this represented in the game? These creatures are going to be extremely evolved compared to their peers. A mighty warrior might be unnaturally massive in stature, or a priest might glow with the holy magic they channel. When creating these lifeforms, it's crucial for them to represent how important they are to the world properly, both in terms of lore and mechanics. These foes are supposed to be a step above their more common counterparts, and it's vital that they have UI indicators like different colored names and more unique designs that showcase their glory. They then check in with their art director about how the art team goes about designing and implementing the visual styles of the V-Blood lifeforms. A picture of the Alpha Wolf is showcased while they describe that the director feels they needed to find a balance between grounding the lifeforms in relation to its more common counterparts, while also giving them a unique flair. Many of these lifeforms are paragons for their kind, and the Church of Luminance wouldn't exactly take kindly to their champions exhibiting vampiric qualities. So instead, these ones convey status appropriate to their station and circumstances, which I do find kind of ironic and slightly funny to think about how some of these Church of Luminance champions we come across will have a trace of blood descended from Dracula himself. Like, imagine if these humans were capable of running a blood test. But anyway, they talk about the qualities of V-Blood lifeforms a little more and describe how their visuals are designed. But following that, they discuss the first preliminary beta that was ran for this game back in December of last year. This was a relatively small test, but something bigger than they were capable of doing internally to get a better reading on what the servers were capable of handling, alongside getting some first impressions from some fresh eyes on the game. They ran this test over the course of a few weeks during limited sessions with people they had handpicked from various media platforms and signups. They state that they wanted testers with strong communication skills and an active enough interest in the game to ensure they'd actively participate. They showcased a picture of a player-built castle during the beta while talking about how they observe players from their office Discord while in their developer mode. This is pretty much the end of the developer update, but I wanted to showcase this picture as well. It shows off a little bit more of the outdoor action. The next developer blog is titled Sharpening Our Fangs, but before we begin I wanted to take a second to talk about an upcoming game on Steam called Guild of Dragons. I was contacted by the developers and able to partner with them for a quick showcase of the game during this video. Right now all they have is a pre-alpha trailer that can be found on their Steam page, but this game really caught my attention because it's a mixture between real-time strategy, colony simulator, and first-person role-playing game. As the name advocates, this game is centered around building your settlement but with dragon taming involved. You can raise these dragons and explore with or without them, farm different crops like dragon fruits, flowers, herbs, etc. This game lets you expand your settlement, meaning you can create more workers to staff your buildings, go through the production chain to get access to new technology, and even do the same work your workers do with your own character in first person. There will be creatures and monsters we come across in this game, and some of them will even be guarding rare resources, but the main enemy of the game will be known as the Drab. They dominate with an iron fist and have influence over areas where you can come across ancient dragon eggs and other different types of monsters. There's also going to be a questline system alongside of course a progression path for both your character and dragon, and every single decision you make will have a benefit or come with a cost. There's definitely more to talk about for this game, like seasonal weather effects or the backstory inside it, but instead we'll leave it there for now since that should be everything you'll need to know currently for the game. Really appreciate the Guild of Dragons developers for reaching out for this showcase, and let's jump right back into the dev blog breakdowns. So we're picking back up with the blog posted on February 24th known as Sharpening Our Fangs. For this developer blog, they decided to give people a little bit of a taste of what everybody in the team is working on. It begins with the portion known as the Creatures of Vardoran. A living world requires living inhabitants, and they're dedicating effort to realizing the vitality of that atmosphere. A few projects during this time were surrounding the creatures of Vardoran and the different ways you can interact with them. For starters, there was a showcase from the technical artists that revolved around the critters and how they operate. The system has two parts, the critters' behavior and determining when and where to spawn them. This gift shows off how if you approach critters like these birds, they'll scatter. They'll mind their own business if you keep your distance, but should you get too close, they will immediately notice you and flee in the opposite direction. The second part of the explanation is a bit more complicated. Because it would hinder overall game performance from constantly processing all these little background creatures out in the world, the team is instead designing a system that generates the critters only when it needs to. It determines where players are and uses specially tagged objects out in the world to spawn them out of sight so that they can then wander into view. These new systems are part of what will add depth into the world for player immersion. The next section is titled Dark Steeds with Superior Breeds. 10 out of 10 title on that, by the way. This dives into the mount aspect of the game with the creative director. With expansions on the mount system, the team is intending to make our riding companions a little bit more fleshed out and interesting. In earlier iterations, they found horses to be extremely valuable, but ultimately disposable. They weren't challenging to find in certain areas, and there was very little that was unique about them individually. But there has been some changes. Horses will now have randomized qualities, offering differences in movement, speed, rotation, and acceleration. So naturally, some will feel better to ride than others, and you'll quickly find yourself coveting your favorite mount. Of course, if you're going to have a favorite, you're going to have to be able to name it as well. The cherry on top is the addition of storage space, letting your horse carry your loot from place to place with greater efficiency. The next section is titled V-Blood on the Dance Floor. It's a quick segment but dives into the animation progress. In this showcase, we see someone called a Lightweaver, and the animator describes how the way a lifeform is standing can speak volumes on how they behave. In this case, it describes how they would go about attempting to strike down a player. The way the Lightweaver stands in her concept art, which I'll post up on the screen, gives the impression of an elegant but frustrated individual with pure destructive powers at her fingertips. This animation shows off the early blocking process to the left and the finished product of the animation on the right. This next section is titled Moving Mountains with Max, and goes into how the starting zones of V-Rising have seen some huge changes since the first preliminary test. These massive changes involve how they utilize the chunk system, which we went over in a previous breakdown, and the world team has taken these areas built off of many individual chunks and fused them, making the terrain more technically cohesive, letting them blend the spaces to fit more naturally together while freeing up some technical limitations. We then have blades, bats, and blood trails showing off some artwork representing a concept for the blood trail. The trail will tell you when the blood prey is close, and it's crucial to remember that you can choose which targets to start tracking first and pursue in whatever order. And the final section I'd like to go over is just showcasing both the skill animations of the sword weapon and the effects surrounding the vampire teleporter. Both of these are ones we talked about in the recent media showcase video I did, but I figured we'd go ahead and briefly talk about these again since they're included in the blog. But with that, that's everything we have to go over for these two specific developer blogs. The next ones we do before early access will be the miscellaneous ones, such as the ones that dive a little bit more into the art style of the game. Until then, have a wonderful night or day, folks, and farewell.